Welcome to another exciting edition of ATACS, Adults Talk About Cool Stuff. This is episode 41 on July 8th, 2018. I am your host, Flex, from Raleigh, North Carolina. Joining me is Will from Greenville. How's it going, Will?
So good.
Glad to hear it. Also joining me is Nate from Clayton, North Carolina.
Hey, hey.
And rounding out our crew today is Ryan from New York. How's it going, Ryan?
It's going.
Great. Everyone's very cheery today, and we're ready to talk about some video games.
Video games.
I like those.
Yeah. Video thing.
They're pretty fun.
Yeah, they're all right.
Yeah, they can be a good time.
I've been known to play a video game in my day.
Pass.
We got a hard pass from Will, so it's been nice having you on, Will. How about we start with Mr. Ryan today?
Hey,
shake things up here.
Let's do it.
What you been playing, Ryan?
Well, I have been playing a bit more, I guess, depth than breadth for this podcast. So I don't have.
I like going deep.
I don't have a ton of games to talk about, but I've been hitting the God of War pretty hard and living the Norse mythology and punching some of it in the face.
So we opened our spoiler cast a couple weeks ago with a question that I'm going to pose to you. Who is the God of War?
This is surprisingly a stumper.
So my understanding. So again, I am new to this franchise. But my understanding is that in the first game, so spoilers, if you don't want the,
I think we can safely spoil
the story of the first God of War spoiled for you.
So, like 14-year-old game.
From my outsider perspective, my understanding is that Ares betrayed Kratos, and then Kratos killed Ares and sort of became the God of War in the process. But I don't know if that's correct.
Yeah, within the Greek mythology, that Ares is the God of War, and then Kratos usurps him.
Yep.
Okay, so
that is correct.
That's cool, because playing this game, having that kind of I think this is what happened, but I'm not really sure, has been...
So where are you at in this one?
So I think I just, I'm going to be kind of try not to spoil anything, but I think I'm about to enter this realm that I've been trying to reach for a while.
Is it the first time you've changed realms?
No, by far it's not.
Does this realm start with a J?
Yes.
Okay.
It certainly does.
I think you're probably, if you've been going deep as you say, I'm guessing you're near the end. Yeah,
I mean, I've fully upgraded my weapons. I've almost finished the trials. It feels like I'm doing in-game side questy stuff.
Yeah, if you've been doing the trials, then you are very in-game.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. How do you like it?
I like it a lot. I think what they've done with the visuals and the story are the story is super cool. Which I'm digging that a lot. That's one of the things that kind of attracted me to this entry, is that they turned it from kind of this stupid over the top,
I don't know what you're talking about. This game is really grounded and emotional.
To be fair, I think the first game was the first game was not that ridiculous. The first game was a good story,
but it's not stupid.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. The second and third games, yes, they were dumb.
They're stupid. Yeah.
Yeah. The premise of the first game actually sounded like a pretty grounded way to go about what they were setting out to do. And then second and third game just felt like they were trying to over the top it way too hard. So I really like what they've done. I mean, this is a cool story that I can't think of that many examples that I've seen in video games of this kind of father-son adventure.
Boy.
There it is.
And I mean, they make it work. They hit it.
Yeah.
They hit it well on most of the notes, without too many kind of weird side turns. Especially considering what that is, that you're you're playing a game about gods and mythology. Like they managed to keep it pretty grounded with the characters.
Mm-hmm.
And then I like the gameplay. I've been playing it. So first off, I have been playing it on my new PS4 Pro.
Nice.
So, yeah, pretty sweet.
Which setting did you end up going with?
I went with resolution.
Okay.
And it turns out that the game has a built-in motion blur.
Okay.
So the blur that I'm seeing, I don't think is TV or anything. It's just
that makes sense.
I was fiddling through settings, and it's like, change your motion blur. It's defaults to 10 out of 10.
Yeah, so you're playing on PS4 Pro resolution mode on a 4K TV?
Yeah, does your TV have HDR and or 4K?
Yes, to both.
Okay,
it's a new TV as well.
I bet it looks incredible on that setup.
Yeah.
It looks pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I felt that game was probably the best looking console game I've ever played, or at least up there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on a regular PS4, so
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how much of a difference it makes, but I have not been unhappy.
It looks good regardless.
Yeah.
I have some pretty cool screenshots too, because one thing it does that they did in Horizon, which I also liked, was they have a photo mode.
Oh yeah, they added that in.
After that actually got added after we played it.
Oh, that's a bummer. It is a bit more restrictive than a game like Horizon. Like there are times I'll pull it up and it's like kind of locked your camera. Whereas in Horizon, they had a pretty flexible camera regardless of where you're at. So, but that's just an aside. But yeah, I would say I like the gameplay overall. I put it on Give Me a Challenge, which has been tougher than I expected.
Yeah, that's the second highest difficulty.
Yeah, I think that's what you played.
That's what I played it on then, yeah. Which is pretty challenging, especially at the beginning.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel, is that, you don't really have context for these decisions, and I guess it, I don't necessarily regret it, but I think it's made the mid to late game combat a lot more fun, but at the beginning it was like fighting all these like higher level enemies that are just like three-shotting you, and I guess that's better than having to grind it out, but it's just really frustrating. Like, and that I guess also plays into. I had some mild frustrations with the loot system because.
I was going to ask you about your experience with that, because Nate and I had some gripes with that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, getting to parts of the game where you're doing these kind of challenge mode trials and side quests, you see where they wanted it to end up, and I feel like that's where you see some of the interesting parts and the good parts of it. But like throughout the story, there are just like, treasure chests and items all over the place, and it's like, hey, if you upgrade this stat to 200, like, you'll get some special bonuses on these sets of skills, and it's like, that's great. All my items together add up to like 50. So it just, that customization that I think they were shooting for, and like, plus with how challenging the combat is early on, like it just feels like, it's somewhere between noise and frustration, and neither of those things are really good. So I found myself just basically ignoring the loot and using whatever items I found during the main story until
just whatever is the highest level, slap it on and go. That's what I do.
And then spend all my money to upgrade Atreus, which costs, because that's pretty linear, pretty straightforward, and that was basically all the money I had most of the time.
And he's also amazing.
Yeah.
And he's really good. So I like that mechanic a lot too. I think what they've done with your companion, he's one of the best companions, I think, for a video game as far as like a direct gameplay type thing. I guess that reminds me a little bit of BioShock Infinite, although she was sort of a non-combatant.
Yeah, but she did have some actions you could do during fights that were kind of similar to what you can do with Atreus. He's not as consistent, obviously, but
yeah, Atreus, man. Sometimes
Atreus just straight up murders fools.
Yeah,
I just rely on him, like doing like these challenges, and like there are 10 enemies popping up, and it's like, all right, Atreus, I'm gonna sit back here and hold my shield up, for a few seconds just to get a feel for this battle.
And mash square.
Yeah, you go hit these things.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, he's really powerful.
But yeah, no, I think that is super cool. So I'm looking forward to. I think
Well,
I'm going to finish up a couple of these challenges and then push through the main quest and see how far it goes.
Yeah,
I'm glad.
I'll be curious to talk to you when you're done about some spoilery stuff, because there's some interesting stuff that goes on that we won't talk about here. But it's cool that you're enjoying it. I think that journey is good of Kratos and Atreus for sure.
Yeah,
I'm glad you're liking it, and especially since you like. It's interesting to hear your perspective, having without the attachment to the previous God of War games. So I'm glad you're still digging it without that. So like, I would have guessed this game would stand up on its own, but it's nice to hear that's true.
Yeah, and I mean, I like some of the nods and throwbacks to the previous games, even though I don't. I just have sort of an outsider's perspective.
I like the way he looks at his wrists.
Yeah.
It's cool.
I guess aside from God of War, the other things I've been playing a few other things, but we've talked about most of these before. I don't think so I will mention I did spin up World of Warcraft Legion again to kind of do a few things because they're releasing their expansion next month. So I picked up on that to try and round out a few things, pre-prep for the expansion. But other than that, I played through Kingdom Rush Origins.
Is that a phone jam?
I did play it on the phone, yeah. I think all those games may have originally been Flash games, but I've played them all on the phone.
Is that like a tower defense thing? What is Kingdom Rush?
It is, yeah.
That's what I thought, but I wasn't sure.
So it's, I think, the third game in that sort of quote-unquote franchise. And the original Kingdom Rush game was actually one of my favorite tower defense games. I think it's probably one of the best out there. They just do a lot of cool things with it. And it's very like crisp and clean and easy to understand. And they have a lot of challenges, a lot of modes. So I'm a big fan of that one. And then the second game is pretty similar, but it's still really good. And then Origins, the third game, is also really similar. So, I mean, the formula holds up well enough that I could still enjoy it and play most of the maps like the normal mode campaign, but it's feeling a little long in the tooth.
How long are those games? I assume they have like a campaign of sorts.
Yeah, it does have a campaign. I'm not actually sure. I would guess maybe like 10 hours, give or take.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, it's kind of a reskin. It feels like a reskin in a lot of ways of the previous games to me, which is fine. I mean, I got it on sale for $1. I'm not unhappy with that purchase. I enjoyed playing through it, but as far as like doing the challenge content and stuff like that, I might poke at it here and there, but I've done that in previous games, and it was fun, but I really feel like it would help to mix up that formula a bit, try some new things. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at on the Kingdom Rush. I don't know. I was originally looking at their that same studio. They've released a game called like Iron Marines or something like that. It's like a space themed tower defense game. But after playing Origins, I was like, well, if they're just going to keep doing the same game with a different skin, like I don't know if I really want to follow this that closely.
You must go deeper, Ryan.
Heh. I think I've went deep enough on that franchise. It's good. I would recommend it. I would recommend all 3 games.
Right. You've maybe gotten your fill, it sounds like.
Yep.
Cool. Anything else been tickling your fancy lately?
Nothing new. Those are kind of the big things.
Cool. I know you've still been clocking some time into Vermintide, but
yeah, I mean, would you like to hear more about Vermintide?
But cool, yeah. Glad you've been enjoying the God of War and still been digging these other long running games as well. Well, if that's all for Mr. Ryan, I'm going to throw it on to our other tower defense fan, Mr. Will.
Well, I'm going to try and catch it when you throw it to me. I tried those Kingdom Rushes, and they definitely have some polish. Actually, for me, and I probably could have stuck with it more, but I actually found them a little too challenging. but I don't know. I probably was missing some key strategic elements that maybe you have a hero in that game as well as the towers, or at least you did in the first game. And depending on which hero you pick, different heroes are good in different situations, and you can kind of choose to upgrade your hero instead of your towers. So maybe I never quite got that balance right. I don't know. I'd have to talk to Ryan about it to see what I'm doing wrong. But over the past 2 weeks, I decided I'd just kind of limit to things that I'd actually finished, other than things I've been working on, even if I'm kind of into it, just to kind of simplify things. So
we do need some way to simplify it from the 30 games you've been playing.
There you go. So the first one I wanted to mention was Ben and Ed Blood Party, which I mentioned very briefly at the tail end of our last episode. So it's a game I played with 2 of my friends. It's sort of like a 3D multiplayer platformer. And so you've got these sort of tracks, I guess, and you're trying to sort of, platform your way through the tracks, but you play as a zombie. And the main twist, I mean, the graphics look pretty good, but the main twist is that, when you play as this zombie, you can get sort of different parts of your body like severed. So like there are lots of blades on the courses. And so you might, try to jump like through this blade, and if you don't time it right, the blade might chop your body, like chop your legs off. And then, but because you're just this zombie, like it's fine. You can just sort of like walk around on your hands, and you're a little bit slower, and you can't jump as high or as far, but you're fine. I mean, mostly. And then you can
get your limbs back?
Well, not really. So the way it kind of works is you have a certain number of lives. So you might have a versus map where you've got 25 lives, and whenever you restart basically fully formed as a zombie, but you can only restart at the checkpoints. So if you don't make it, so most of the maps seem like they have like 3 or 4 checkpoints. So if you don't make it to the first checkpoint, and what happens is, let's say you do get chopped in half and you make it to the checkpoint and then you die. You actually, when you respawn fully formed again. So that's kind of the way it kind of works on that front. So that's not the only way it can happen. I mean, you can lose like one leg, both legs, one arm, both arms. You can actually be split directly down the middle, and all of these sort of change the way you kind of move. And then the other piece that's really interesting about it is that you can detach your head and throw it. So let's say there's an obstacle that you know that there's no way you can get. You can sort of detach your head and maybe jump and move forward, and you can kind of see the trajectory of where it'll go and toss your head to the next checkpoint. And so sometimes you might not actually be able to make it through, but if you can sort of somehow finagle your way to where you can throw your head to the next checkpoint, you can then respawn fully formed at that checkpoint. And because there are versus maps, there are other random way. I mean, you can punch by default if you have arms, but
Well, yeah.
but you can also, if you have arms, you can pick up like sometimes there are these little acid sprayers or like giant spoons or chainsaws, and so you can kind of maim your buddies as you're going through. And you can also customize your zombie. So my zombie had these like sweet pink kicks. I had this like leotard that was pink, and I had like an axe that was just sticking out of my head by default. And all of this really is about as much fun as it sounds. It's like a hoot.
Yeah.
The tough thing that happens is like the later maps are so difficult because they kind of ramp, and there's something like 60 maps in the game or something. But the later maps are so difficult that not only do a lot of times if you actually get hit by an obstacle, a lot of times it'll knock you off the map. So there's less like hopping around on one leg or whatever than there is in the earlier maps. And also they're so tough that like even if they put things in the map that you can use to hurt your friends, you actually feel like unsporting, because there were some maps like we just couldn't even get to the end of, like,
Mhm.
you know, even outside of like who won, you know, so it's kind of a blast. Go ahead.
Can I ask a question? When
Yeah.
you say that hurting your friends feels unsporting, is that just you?
Well, no, we got like my friend. Well, I spoke to the friend that you know that we know mutually, Ryan, and he said that yeah, he had noticed that at that point we kind of did have a truce. We had this sort of unofficial truce going. Now, I will say that I probably refrained from the ridiculous stuff. Like I refrained from grabbing spoons and hitting people with spoons probably more than the other two people I was playing with. But yeah,
I'm teasing a little bit,
yeah.
but I know your appetite for co-opetition is a bit lower than perhaps mine.
So I will say that I got whacked with I whacked people with spoons and chopped off limbs with chainsaws probably less frequently. But towards the end of the game, we all sort of, unless it was right after a checkpoint, because at that point you knew that like they weren't really losing a lot of progress. But if they were like right beside the next checkpoint and their hands are all sweaty and you know, they're all tense and you just like punch them off the side, like it's like, oh no. But I don't know. Maybe if we had some Ryan in there, it would have made it seem more palatable. But I think if you like these sorts of like, if you like these well, I don't know. There's just the tolerance for scoundrel like behavior, I think, goes up when Orion is involved. But I think if you like these sort of like local co-op crazy jams, like if you like stuff like Gang Beasts or Mount Your Friends or I don't know, Tower Fall or Smash Brothers or these just sorts of like kooky multiplayer party games, it kind of fits that bill.
Mm-hmm.
But
that sounds cool.
Yeah, I mean, if you got a group of folks, and it's got online co-op, you know, so that does set it apart from some of these other ones.
What's the name of it again?
It's Ben and Ed Blood Party. Okay. And apparently there was a Ben and Ed that was like single player before that, which was also sort of like a multiplayer platformer runner with zombies, but I don't think it had a multiplayer component, something like that. I don't know. The other thing I wanted to mention was a top-down shooter called Tower 57. And as soon as I heard that this thing was coming out, I was kind of interested in it. You know, I kind of tend to. I've found that I'm kind of a fan of these top-down shooters, especially if they've got like a cool aesthetic or customization options. And this one, the world looked really, really cool. They actually call it a diesel punk world, which I don't even know what that means, but I guess you can kind of tell what that means.
Yeah. Put punk on the end of something and it means something.
It means something. And they've got kind of like a carefully crafted environment. I'm usually kind of turned off by roguelikes or procedurally generated levels. And so this one has, like everything is very purposefully done, and there are a lot of secrets and things like that you can kind of uncover. It's kind of got this weird sort of like, it's like all of humanity or whatever's left of humanity lives in these different towers, and each tower kind of has a supervisor. And the towers, in some ways, I think they could even be compared to like the vaults in Fallout, like what happens in each tower. But it's an interesting thing. Like there are a lot of cool customization options. Like you've got 6 characters, and you can pick 3 of them to kind of take with you when you do a playthrough. You've got body upgrades, you've got weapon upgrades. So the body upgrades are pretty interesting. The way those are introduced is you just run as you're moving forward. There's this little cutscene, and there's some little like crazy like shark beast that like charges at you and just takes your legs off, and then you're just kind of like, and I guess this is a running theme of today's ATACS. You can get your legs taken off, but you somehow like pull yourself over to this machine and you replace your legs with like mechanical ones, and so that's kind of like another little like funky tech cyber aspect of this game. It's got online co-op, and I originally played it with a friend of mine, and it was just kind of too brutal. And we tried it on normal, and then we tried it on easy, and this particular bud just couldn't seem to kind of get the hang of it, and so I didn't want to keep frustrating him.
Yeah, did you have a harder time in co-op than in single player?
I did, and I went back. I think it was yesterday or the day before. I went back and finished it on single player, and it's not a particularly long game. You probably finish it in like 4.5 hours or something like that. But yeah, I had an easier time in single player, and I think the thing is if your partner loses all of their characters, you lose, even if you have all 3 of yours. So so it's not like he can watch you for a minute or anything like that. So it really, both players kind of have to be on point.
If you had 2 Williams, do you think, like, I guess I'm just curious how it scales for co-op.
Yeah, I think, I probably, if there was another person there who had played a lot of these top-down shooters like I have, I mean.
Do you think that would make it easier than single player?
Yeah, maybe. The game ramps up really strangely. So at the very beginning, like, it's just brutal. Like, it's just really, really hard. And then as you kind of get these upgrades on your character and on your weapons, there's also an ultimate move that you can do. There's a meter that charges up as you do it. And whenever you hit the ultimate move, basically the screen kind of freezes, and then whatever your ultimate is kind of comes out of the side of the screen. And so one of them that's really ridiculous is there's this gangster character who uses a Tommy gun, and his ultimate, the screen freezes and this little car drives up on the bottom, and these guys like point Tommy guns out the side and shoot the enemies on the screen. So it's like a little like a little 50s drive-by shooting or something like that.
That's pretty great. I mean, what diesel punk game is complete without 50s Tommy gun?
Right. I don't know. Whatever diesel punk means. But it's tough because I really did kind of want to experience the whole thing in co-op, but it's just like the guy who purchased it with me just didn't really have what he needed, I guess, to kind of keep it going. But it was pretty fun. I had a good time with it. The weird thing is that you can technically, upgrade the weapons and the body of all 3 of your characters, and you can kind of rotate between those characters. But I just sort of picked one and then just spent all my time upgrading that single character's weapons and armor. And there was one time that character died, and I had to like find a way to resurrect him, which in this game you do with these orange balls. And but otherwise,
this is the most Will thing I've ever heard.
Right. No, I just picked one thing. Yeah. So that's
like they intend for you to use multiple characters, but you're like, no, I only want one, and if I lose that one, I'm going to hell and back to revive them.
Yeah. That does sound like it. Does sound kind of like.
Why would I want to use anything else?
It sounds like the Tritons, doesn't it?
So I'm kind of curious, like, because I've played a handful of top-down shooters as well, some multiplayer, and I'm kind of curious, like, I know you've played some like LiveLock, like what are some games that stand out to you, and like where, because my experience with these has been when they hit really well, but most of them have something wrong. Like,
right. And so you want to know kind of which ones I've played or what is
kind of where you're at on the genre and like what kind of drew you to Tower
as
57 in particular.
Yeah, as a quick little kind of look-see, I see, Helldivers, Ruiner. Of course, there's like some of the 10 Tons games like Judge and let's see.
Did you play Satellite Rain?
I played a bit of it, and that style is not usually like for me. That sort of having a the funny thing that it's funny that you mentioned Satellite Rain. So what's the unique thing about Satellite Rain, Ryan?
Oh, I don't know. I was just
you've got a squad.
Okay.
So, you know what I mean? I'm like, squad.
See, that's making Will use too many different things. He can't put all of his eggs into one basket.
I need one very large basket for all my eggs. But yeah, the best top-down shooter I probably ever played is Judge. And so I don't know if you were to try that one out and you didn't like it or you did like it. I think it's got a lot of the elements that I do like. But this one, in terms of the way that I guess I'd say like the mood and the environmental design and the style of it, I think it's one of the more stylish ones I've played.
Is it more stylish than Hotline Miami?
Well, visually, but not entirely in terms of like the way it all comes together.
Does it have more style?
Style points. But yeah, it was a fun little thing. And apparently it was kickstarted. But I really appreciate, I try to like throw some dollars when the game like spends a lot of time carefully crafting an environment in this age of everything being procedurally generated. Or at least it seems like a lot of the top-down shooters that I had seen for a long time had procedurally generated environments. So
cool.
I appreciate that sort of thing.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I might have to give that one another look then.
Yeah. The only other thing I wanted to kind of touch on for just a second was I played Quarantine Circular.
And this is the second one of these?
The second Bithell short that has come out. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
what was the first one called again?
The first one was called Subsurface Circular. So Circular is the so the funny thing is
the Circular franchise.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. So in the first game, you're on a loop. You're on a metro that's like a loop. And so that's kind of where the circular comes from. In this one, I think what the circular is, and this is, I'm not really giving anything away, but what Quarantine Circular is really about, you start the game and you play as a translator and you walk up and basically you've done this apparently before. You're trying to kind of come up with what they call, I guess, like a working body of knowledge for translation. And so you walk up to this strange creature, and you're trying to kind of figure out how to translate. And so you have to talk to them to kind of like say, well, this is what my name is, what's your name, and try to set some baseline so you can sort of start building an understanding of what language they use. And in this one, it's an alien. And apparently this is the first alien that anyone's ever seen on Earth. At the same time this alien kind of shows up, there's this plague that's going on that is apparently destroying huge amounts of the population. And later in the game, this plague is considered a possible like extinction event. And so a lot of the questions that the game kind of has you consider is, why did this guy show up now? Does he have a role to play in this plague? I mean, is he responsible? Can he help us deal with it? Should we trust him? Is he trying to take advantage of us right now? Like, why would he show up right now? And so that's a lot of what the game is kind of getting at. I don't think it's as good as Subsurface Circular. It does explore different themes, but one of the things that it does that's kind of weird is in Subsurface Circular, you play the entire game as this detective named like Tech something. I don't know. He's blue. Blue detective robot. And in this game, you kind of switch between like 4 or 5 different characters. And the weird thing is you don't play. So you might play as character A in scene A, And then the other characters, of course, are doing whatever they're going to do independent of you. But there's typically at least one scene where you kind of choose what a character will do. And so that kind of creates this odd situation where, the players or the characters can kind of become whatever you want them to be. Like, I think this guy is tolerant. So when I play him, I'm going to talk as though I'm the tolerant guy. Or, I don't like this character. So, I'm going to just say the meanest, most ridiculous things. And so it kind of, I think it kind of weakens the punch, the emotional punch or the narrative punch of the game. But even so, I think if you're interested in ideas like, exploring whether or not we should trust extraterrestrials, if that's something that you've considered before, or even thinking about like who deserves help. I won't go into any more about the story, but that's a question that kind of comes up during the game. And I actually think it's the most important and most interesting question is who deserves help. But it's pretty cool. And I'm glad that, Bithell is doing these things.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting to see his pivot, because I remember seeing, because these are, correct me if I'm wrong, but these are primarily like, I don't know if visual novel is quite accurate, but these are very story and dialogue driven games. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. Basically like narrative.
And I remember watching an interview with him after Thomas Was Alone kind of caught, like that game was way more popular than he would have expected it to be. Right. And a lot of the praise for the game was about its story and like a lot of the writing and that kind of stuff. And like a lot of the gripes people have were like, well, it doesn't control that great. And he was like, yeah, I was just trying to make Super Mario Brothers, not a deep story.
That's great.
So
it's like, dude, you're deeper than you thought.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see that he's kind of pivoted and leaned into like what accidentally made his first game like the success it was.
Yeah, and basically the gameplay part of it. And this is it's really, so you talk to people, you kind of choose what to say to them. By choosing certain options, you get access to what are called keywords. So for instance, like it's almost like, let's say you're like, and of course it works in the first game because you're a detective, but let's say you're talking to someone and you say, has this person done anything suspicious? And you're like, well, I don't know. Have you asked them about their gambling habits? And so maybe that's the first time that you learn that maybe this particular person that you're talking about has a gambling problem. And then every other person that you talk to, you now have the option to ask them about this person's gambling problem. But of course, before then, you didn't know that was sort of a thing that was pertinent, And so a lot of the game kind of works that way. You're kind of talking to one person, they give you some sort of clue or some sort of insight that you can then bring to the other characters. And so in some ways, it's kind of like, I guess it's like a narrative adventure, 1.5 hour dialogue game, I guess.
Right.
And they're about $5 a piece.
Yeah.
but no, yeah, cool. I like them. But I will say that, like I said, I thought the first one was better. But I'm definitely interested to see where he goes if he keeps making them.
Yeah. Do you know if he said if he's going to keep making these? Or?
This one was actually really recent. This was a 2018. So
yeah, release date May 22nd, 2018.
Yeah. So for me, I'm probably more on the cusp of the fresh releases than I usually.
Yeah, look at you staying current.
I'm trying, I say as I've been playing a lot of Arkham Origins from 2013. But anyway, that's most of what I've been jamming. Just that Tower 57, cool. Ben and Ed. I finished those two, and then finished this Quarantine Circular.
Nice. Well,
on to the next.
Nate.
Huh? What?
Hi.
Hey.
Tell me about that ocean.
There's a big ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And I crashed in it.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, there's a lot of aliens and different things to find in the ocean. And then you try to build a rocket to get out of the ocean.
Have you built the rocket?
I did, yes.
And you were out of the ocean?
Yes. So.
So we are talking about Subnautica.
Yeah, we're talking about a video game.
For anyone who can't read our minds.
Yeah. Which I think we've both finished now.
Yeah, you blitzed through this thing.
Yeah, so I'm on summer break, so sometimes that happens.
Sometimes video games just happen.
Yeah.
How did you like it overall?
I liked it overall for sure.
Mhm.
I think this is where I have trouble determining if I played it too quickly, like too much.
I feel like you had a slow start with it, and then at some point you turned a corner. I don't know if it's because you finished Vampire or whatever else, but I feel like you started slow and then turned a corner and then just blitzed the rest of it.
Yeah. So yeah, I feel like I had kind of an uneven playthrough with Subnautica, where I started off thinking it was kind of interesting. It's a survival game, so you're trying to manage all these different things. You got to make sure you have food and water. You start off just trying to scavenge whatever you can to build basic tools and start building a shelter to live in and just kind of exploring and finding things. And that part was really slow for me.
Mm-hmm. And you played on the survival setting too, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Which is kind of the default.
Yeah. And it wasn't slow in a way that I didn't enjoy. It was just slow in a way that I couldn't sit down and play it for more than about an hour without feeling like I had to go do something else. And partially because I found the survival mechanics of the hunger and thirst somewhat stressful.
Yeah, I actually, as I neared the end of my playthrough, I retrospectively debated if I would have enjoyed it more had I chosen the mode that just turns off the hunger and thirst.
Yeah, I wonder that too.
Because for the beginning part, I thought it was okay, and then later on, as the game went on, it was more of this isn't really a difficult thing to solve. It's just an upkeep thing that I have to do.
Yeah, but there were enough times where it came into play in an interesting way.
Yeah,
that I thought it was overall worth it. Yeah,
I think for me, I'm curious if this is what you're referring to as well. For me, it was some of the longer expeditions later in the game, where you had to more consciously start thinking about all right, I'm going to go on a long expedition. Am I bringing ample supplies?
Yeah, and often I wasn't.
Which can make for some interesting mad dashes.
Yeah, there's some harrowing situations that I got myself into throughout my time with Subnautica in really interesting ways. There were times where the game was really frustrating and that wasn't interesting or fun, but there were definitely some times where the survival mechanics pushed me into a corner that I had made myself.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh no.
Yeah. So that's, I also, we should probably touch on some of these. I also have my frustrations with the game, but I keep coming back to it because there are a lot of just interesting things about it, and one of those things is the way it does if you get in trouble, it's all your own doing.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, I have some examples of maybe not being the case. But...
Are these examples include bugs?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Assuming the game runs properly, when you get into trouble, it's your own doing.
Yeah, for sure. And those are
also
great.
Hit some bugs.
I love the sticky situations that I got myself into and then had to work my way out of. That's where.
Is there one that particularly stands out?
Oh god. Okay, let me think. So
I feel like this is a game that lends itself to good stories.
Yeah, for sure. By the end of the game, there's some pretty deep and remote exotic areas that are far away from where I constructed my base.
So I guess just a quick prelude to this, you start in very shallow water. It's a watery alien planet. And you start out just collecting some basic stuff near the surface. And basically as the game goes, you start pushing farther away from the escape pod you landed in. And you also start pushing deeper. And as you keep pushing further, you find rarer and more valuable resources. And you also find more dangerous creatures and environments.
Yeah. So I definitely got into a situation late in the game with my big sub, which is called the Cyclops. It's kind of like your biggest vehicle that you can create. It's almost like a mobile base.
Yeah.
And it needs a lot of power to run, and it moves very slow.
Yes.
So
And it's
definitely,
big.
and it's big, and it's hard to get into small places.
Yes.
So I definitely had a situation late in the game where I thought I had plenty of water and supplies to go where I needed to go, and then I got down to where I was trying to get to and was like, I'm out of stuff already because it just took a while to get down there.
Especially when you're like trying to maneuver through tight caves with that thing.
And then there were some little annoying critters that wanted to stick themselves onto the butt of my sub and suck out the batteries.
Yep.
And so now I'm stuck in this really deep cave, low on battery, in a slow-moving sub, and no food or water. And I'm just like, well, I guess this is how it ends.
I feel like we need to start playing like a Gilligan's Isle theme or something right about
now.
How'd you get out of it?
So luckily I had...
And the game is not permadeath, so...
Yeah, so if you die, it actually kind of isn't a big deal, which is another thing that's kind of weird.
Yeah. There is one mode you can choose that has permadeath.
Mm-hmm. So, I had parked my smaller sub close enough that I could just make the journey to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took all the power cells out of my big sub, put them in my backpack, and went back to the smaller sub, and then went back to my base and spent 20 minutes recharging them all.
Yeah. And probably farming food and water.
Yeah, farming food and water, which is like the boring, grindy stuff that this game makes you do.
Yeah.
But like the immediate situation of like, I'm stuck in this really hostile area with no power or water, and this is bad, is like interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And did it always feel like wrong to you whenever you had to leave a vehicle somewhere?
It did at first. I got used to I actually started using the little walker robot mech suit called the Prawn.
Yeah, the Prawn.
I started using that a lot as like a beacon to help me get back places. I'll just leave it somewhere because it always shows up on your HUD where it is.
Yeah.
I'll just be like, I'll just leave you here. I'll come back for you later. I'll help me find my way back here.
Did you set manual beacons a lot?
I didn't, and I probably should have.
Yeah, I ended up setting a couple, and I used them more late game because just having beacons was handy.
Yeah. But anyway, we should probably do a spoiler cast on this game so we could just talk about random stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know if this would be a candidate or not. So you kind of, I guess, just to get your more like overall thoughts nailed down, it sounds that, like me, some of the survival grindiness was not to your liking.
Yeah, like it had its high points, it had its moments. Early on, it just kind of was stressful, and I couldn't play it in large chunks. And then eventually, I got to over the hump where like that stuff wasn't difficult anymore, so it was less stressful, which is when I could just kind of play it for hours.
Mm-hmm.
And then I enjoyed a lot of that part. I was just exploring and finding stuff and building out my base and building vehicles, and all that stuff is pretty fun. And then the end game, I ended up not liking very much at all.
Yeah, so that's when you're going into those really deep places.
Yeah.
What did you not like about it? In a non-spoilery way, I guess.
Yeah, in a non-spoilery way. It's not the like narrative or anything, which this game had more narrative than I expected.
I like
that stuff fine.
Yeah, I guess a quick aside on that, it had more narrative than I expected, and I also like the way that it told its narrative.
Yeah.
In that it was just like things happen on this planet, and you kind of are witness to some of it.
Mm-hmm.
And participate in some of it as well, but it's not like, I don't know. It didn't feel video gamey, I guess.
Yeah, the story wasn't being told for you. It wasn't a story about you. It was just a story that you are kind of passing by.
Yeah.
Which is cool. I liked it.
Yeah.
But the end game mechanically is a lot of very long, slow journeys. Which are pretty dull unless you get into like a bad situation, and then they're kind of cool. But and then a lot of like, I missed this one room or this one hidden spot that had a blueprint that you absolutely have to be able to complete the game.
Yeah.
And now I have no idea what to do. And it's like this huge, expansive ocean. Like, it's a very large map,
mm-hmm.
and I know I need to find the blueprint for something to be able to build this piece to the rocket, but I have no idea where that blueprint was. I'm sure I walked by it at some point and just missed it. And that happened to me like 5 times.
Yeah, I was really curious how I could see this game going one of a couple ways for you.
Yeah.
And one thing I was curious about, because I know you're not always big on exploring like very big, open, undirected worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And that's totally what this game is.
Yeah.
And I was curious how you would take to that, because there are definitely parts where it's just like, all right, you just need to get out there and go search for stuff.
Yeah, like I think I can get behind the exploring a big directionless world if there's always going to be multiple ways through whatever the obstacle of the game is, right?
Okay.
Does that make sense? Like,
yeah.
It's the problem I had with Subnautica is not that there's a large area. Yeah, it's not. The problem I had with it was not that it's a large area and they didn't always tell me where to go. It's that, I missed the one thing in this one spot and now I can't progress.
Right.
So I just ended up having to look up where things were.
Yeah, and I had to look up a couple things as well.
Because I didn't want to comb the whole ocean for it.
Yeah, and that's another thing. I feel like with me, a lot of things in this game I'm of two minds of. And this is another thing, because part of me really loves just that they stuck to their guns and was like, no, this is a huge world and anything could be anywhere and it's up to you to find it.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, but that totally does lead to the situations where you can just miss an item and like, you're like, I don't know where this thing is.
Yeah, I think it's just the strict requirements on the end game, like the way things are gated at the end is just because like up until that point, if you miss a blueprint for something, a base function or a tool or something, it's not going to keep you from progressing.
Correct, yeah.
It just makes things a little more difficult because you don't have as many options.
Yeah, you could, in theory, get by without a flashlight, let's say.
Right.
But
then at the end game, it's like, oh, you actually want to finish this. You better have found these 5 things.
Yeah.
What
do you think your favorite thing about the game was? I guess we've talked about some of the things you didn't like, so I guess I'm just curious what's something you did like.
I liked a lot about it. I liked the planning around an excursion.
Yeah.
It does give you the feeling of being an explorer in an unknown world. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, okay, yes. I have an idea about where I want to go. I saw this deep crater near this island. I want to go check it out. Oh, what do I need to do that? Well, I'm going to need some extra batteries. I'm going to need to take my sub in there. I'm going to want the prawn suit with the drill arm. I'm going to want a lot of water. Planning and executing that and then finding something at the bottom of that crater that's useful. That loop, it does over and over, and it's really satisfying.
Yeah, I agree. I also think it does a pretty good job at at least I found the game to have a number of cool surprises. Yeah. Both in terms of the stuff you can make and also just the stuff you find on the planet. Mm-hmm. It was a game that rewarded exploration in the sense of this is an unknown world that's going to have weird things in it.
Yeah, for sure. I also will say that it had a pretty good progression through probably the first 2/3 of the game for me, where every time I was okay, I've done the same kind of routine 2 or 3 times. I'm getting a little tired of it. Then I would find and unlock some new game-changing functionality. Yeah.
That's another thing I was going to mention is a number of the things you can build feel pretty game-changing in the moment.
Because you start just I can barely dive at all, and finding stuff in this shallow water feels kind of intense. And then at the late game, I would on my little scooter that I could just go wherever I wanted. I could dive for 2 minutes.
Yeah,
you have all these different vehicles to work with.
You're pretty powerful at the end game.
Yeah, it has a really good sense of progression in that.
Yeah. So it sounds like you liked it overall.
Yeah, I did for sure.
I'm curious. This is kind of my last comment on it. I also liked it overall, and I think I found it more interesting than I like always enjoyed the moment to moment.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they have a lot of really just cool ideas in there, and maybe we could dive deeper on like a spoiler cast.
Right.
But like even with like some of the like survival game headaches and routines and that stuff, it's like I think somehow that game like really, in the way it was so big and open and forced you to like deal with mundane things like getting water.
Yeah.
I ended up feeling like I had come to understand and learn that world.
Yeah, for sure.
And like felt like I lived there, because like you build a base and you're like, finding food and all that kind of stuff. And I definitely had this like bittersweet moment when like I finally built the rocket and like, rode the little elevator up to the rocket, and I'm like walking along the ramp to get in the shuttle. And then I turn around and look back out, and like you can like, you have a really good vantage point there, and you like, oh, I can see my sub over there, and there's my escape pod, and there's our ship that crash landed, and like there's that island, and like I don't know, it was a really nice moment of like you definitely go on a journey in that game.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, cool.
This will be interesting. This is very likely the game I'll be playing next, and
Nice.
I'm kind of curious where I'll land on it. Because I've enjoyed some survival games. Even a game like Minecraft, it's kind of systems based.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of build a home base and you set out on expeditions that you have to prep for. But not, sometimes those games can be a little too sandboxy. Sounds like maybe this one has something specific in mind. So
Yeah.
I'll be curious how it compares to other games in the genre or with similar elements.
Yeah, it's definitely sandboxy, but I do appreciate that it has like a driving goal.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't know that I would have picked it up myself. How long do you think it took you, Nate?
Well, just over 30 hours, I think.
Okay, that's about similar for me.
Well,
Cool.
The last thing on that, the worst bug I had. I don't know if this is my computer showing its age issue, or if it's an issue with the game, or a combination of the two. But late game, when I was driving vehicles around, and especially if I was just moving from A to B quickly, the game would start to, the longer I was traveling, it would start to have trouble drawing in the environment.
Cool. All right.
And it's even worse than it sounds, because not only can you not see anything as it's sort of popping in around you, but the geometry actually doesn't affect you until it pops in.
Okay, great. So did you go through some walls?
So I ended up with my Cyclops, the big sub, completely stuck inside of one of the like wrecked bases that you can find. And the game just completely flipped out.
Nice.
And I had to quit out and load a previous save, because there was no way I was ever going to get that sub out of the middle of this building.
That's hilarious. I mean, fortunately, the game does let you manually save. So
yeah.
I had to I had one instance where I had to manually load a save because of a bug.
Yeah.
Fortunately, my bugs are like, I probably had on the order of 3 or 4 buggy things, and only the one time I had to reload.
Yeah, I didn't have a lot, just a handful.
It's hilarious that they like every time you start playing, there's like a message that pops up on the right. It's like press F8 to give feedback or report bugs.
Yep.
So it's like they know.
They know.
Anyway,
I'm done talking about that now.
Yeah. What else you been playing?
The other things I've done are also things I think you've touched on, which are the, what is it called? The Awesome Adventures of Captain Spirit.
Captain Spirit.
And Slay the Spire. So I don't know.
What do you want to talk about?
Well, let's talk about Captain Spirit real quick, because there's not a whole lot to say there.
Let's talk about Captain Spirit.
Have you played Captain Spirit, Will?
No, but I based on the crap I like, I would think I've got it downloaded.
It looks like a Don't Nod game.
It is a good don't nod game.
And
It
it's
is a
also
Life is Strange game, and it's free.
There you go.
So this is kind of a prequel to Life is Strange Season 2.
Yeah, like a free teaser episode.
Yeah, it's like one free episode, and at the end they're like, stay tuned, you will see this character again.
Yeah. So we can't say a lot about it without spoiling.
Yeah.
But overall, I liked it.
Mm-hmm.
I like the basic characters and relationships they set up, obviously. And I'm interested to see what Life is Strange Season 2 is.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess it did its job then, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It very much was a setup. So not really a lot happened other than introducing characters and what the issues are.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very much that style of game.
Yeah.
All right.
The one thing I wanted to ask you, Justin, is in the episode, there's all these little objectives you can do.
Uh-huh.
Did you do all of those?
I did.
Okay. How long did that
look
take?
Up a couple of them.
Yeah.
The one that I never would have. So one of the objectives is to play a game on your dad's phone.
Yeah, I didn't get that one.
Yeah, and his phone is locked with a pin.
Yeah.
And I ended up looking up what the pin was, and after seeing what it was, I have no idea how you'd figure that out.
Yeah.
It had a couple things like that were just like kind of like unintuitive that like I just don't know how you'd piece this together.
Yeah, I guess like I get what they were going for. Like all that stuff's mostly optional.
Yeah, I think all of it is actually.
Yeah, probably all is. And there's the whole episode is this one environment, which is their house and like the yard, basically.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, oh, you can dig into this as much as you want.
And
some of them is fine.
Yeah, some of them are more rewarding than others because like some of them, like there's one where you blow up a snowman.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's kind of fun and like something a kid would get into, but like it didn't have any story relevance or didn't really develop anything, I didn't feel like.
It seems like most of them were kind of that way.
Yeah, but then did you do the one where you're like treasure hunting, like you get a map and put pieces of a map together?
No. I think I found a piece of the map but didn't do all of it or something.
Yeah, so like then there's that one where you go through it and like this, what's the kid's name? I don't even remember.
I think it's Chris.
I think it's Captain Spirit.
Captain Spirit.
Right. That's what I know him as.
Yeah.
And he's made his own this like little personal memorabilia stash, and that's what you go dig up. And like,
oh yeah, I did do that. Yeah.
That moment like actually hit me pretty hard.
Yep, that was good.
And it's like this task, this optional task like has way more relevance and is way more effective than the other ones. So like they're definitely not equal.
Yeah. So yeah, I did a few of those and then kind of wandered around to see if any of the others would be like obvious, and they weren't. So then I just finished the episode.
Yeah, I think I did like half of them on my own and was at the point you were at, and I was debating like, do I just go end it or should I just go look up just to see what the things are? And I obviously opted for the second option there.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know that there's much to glean from that about, you know, if that structure would be used in the next season or anything. I kind of doubt it.
My guess would be probably not because there wasn't really much of a story. Like this was character introduction, so I'm guessing the other ones will be like once season 2 proper comes out. My guess is it'll be structured like season 1 was.
Yeah. So I didn't really get into those side objective things. Didn't really do a lot for me, but
I didn't either.
But the relationship between the kid and the dad is real messed up and interesting. And
it's rough.
I want to see where that goes, but I also don't want to see where that goes at all.
Yeah, part of me is like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's not good.
I'm wondering if they're going to have a time jump though, because I can't imagine like if he's a little kid like that, it's probably going to be mostly just him and his dad, and I can't imagine them getting a ton of mileage with just 2 characters. Like I feel like there needs to be more characters introduced.
Yeah, well, there are some characters that show up at the end that'll probably be important.
For better or worse.
Yeah.
It's going to be a bad scene.
Yeah, this whole thing's probably just going to make me really depressed. Anyway, that's Captain Spirit.
Yep. Sounds like a don't nod game.
Yep.
Do you want to talk about Slay the Spire?
Sure. That's a card game and a roguelike.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty fun.
Yeah. I'm really interested to hear from our roguelike correspondent, Mr. Flex.
Yeah.
How your experience with Slay the Spire. I know that's your jam.
Well, so there are 3 characters currently. I don't know if that's final or not because this game's still technically early access.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they're adding more.
But it is. Sorry?
I'm not sure if they're adding more or not.
Yeah. I was like reading the early access notes and like it was talking they were going to add more than 1 or 2 characters, but they've already have more than that. So like clearly the early access notes are already outdated.
Yeah.
But anyway, each character has different cards they use. So I've only played as the first character so far, the Ironclad.
Ironclad, yep.
Who's most of his cards seem pretty basic, but like
yeah, he's the most straightforward.
Okay. My first run, I got to the boss of the second. What are they like floors or?
They call them acts, but
acts.
Yeah, I mean.
So I got to the boss of the second act, knowing there are 3 acts, and I was like, "Oh, this seems pretty easy."
Yep.
If my first run, I get to the end of the second act.
Yep.
And I was like still learning the mechanics, learning the cards, didn't see anything, and I was like, "Okay, this is kind of interesting, I guess."
And then it ramps.
Yeah. Well, then I got creamed by the boss of the second act.
Yeah.
And then I started again and struggled through the first act and died on the first boss. And I was like, okay. And then I started again and the same thing happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, well, maybe I just got lucky the first run. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I started my 4th run and I was like, all right, let me try like a different kind of strategy with the cards I choose.
Yeah.
And then I got some really freaking amazing relics. So you get these relics that provide like passive bonuses.
Mm-hmm.
And you can find them in random ways. There are random like FTL style events that you can get relics from. You get them if you choose to take on elite enemies, drop relics. You can sometimes buy them in the shop. Like there are a few ways you can get them. And I just got like some really freaking amazing relics in the first act, and then was also making some smarter card choices. And I just freaking rolled through the whole campaign. Like, like it was nothing. And I'm like, oh, okay. Turns out if you get a few good drops, it can make a world of difference.
It can, but also I think the thing that you hit on is that being intentional in your card choices also makes a huge difference.
So there's definitely give and take there because it was the combination of me being smarter about things and getting good drops. Like, I think it needs both of those to be successful.
Because that's the switch that I hit after playing a couple times was, I need to actually think about my deck and like pick things that go together and stop picking all this other bull crap that doesn't go with what I have already.
Yeah, because like the first couple runs, I mean, you're also just learning the cards the first couple runs. So I couldn't really tell what was good or not. Even in the run I won, that 4th run, I had cards at the end of the game that I had chosen, like not really sure if they'd work or not. And then by the end, I was like, oh, I should not have picked this card.
Yeah, I've done that for sure.
So I had a few filler cards. Yeah. But like that game, you just really want to keep a small deck.
Yes.
Like I think you start with 10 cards in your deck.
Yeah.
And when I beat the game, I had 18, and really 3 or 4 of those I didn't really want, at least. So like I think you want to keep your deck in like the 10 to 15 range, really.
Yeah. There's actually an achievement for beating it with 5 or fewer cards.
Okay.
Which is pretty insane because your hand size is 5. So
your hand size you would have the same hand every turn.
Have the same hand every turn, yeah.
Which sounds amazing, to be honest, because like if you know what cards you're getting every turn and they're all good cards.
Right.
So another thing the game, here's some of the things I like about it in like the roguelike nature. I like that you can choose your route.
Yep.
So in each act, there's like a map with a few diverging paths, and you can look at it and be like, okay, I want to make sure I hit this shop, or I want to try out this elite or whatever. So that allows you to kind of like balance what you want to accomplish a little bit.
Yeah.
Because there are pros and cons for a lot of the different events. I heavily prioritize the shops, not to buy things, but to get rid of cards in your deck.
Right. So every time you visit a shop, you can pay money to remove one card from your deck.
Yes. And I think in my successful run, I don't think I bought a single other thing from the shop.
Yeah.
I think I hit every shop. I think I hit as many shops as I possibly could, and all I ever spent money on was removing cards.
Yeah, which is a totally viable strategy.
Because you start with some crummy cards in your starting deck.
Yeah.
That you just want to get rid of.
Mm-hmm.
So that helps, and then being more intentional with your cards helps. So I think between those two things, like the map and being choosy with your cards, you do have a pretty good amount of control.
You do.
Over like how successful you are. So there's
still a lot of randomness, but I think a strategy makes the world of difference.
Yes. So that's the part of the game I like. But then the randomness, and I think the main two random things are the relic drops and what act bosses you get, because the act 3 boss I got was kind of a joke.
Yeah. And
I didn't go into that fight feeling like I had it.
Mm-hmm.
But then halfway through the fight, I'm like, oh, this guy's not doing anything.
Yeah.
And then I just steamrolled that final boss. I'm like, that wasn't even much of a fight. If he had been any challenging at all, this would have gotten real dicey real quick.
Right.
And it was actually frustrating. So the boss's special thing was every time you use a power, which is a specific kind of card.
Yeah.
Its strength would go up 1, and that strength increase is a permanent strength increase, which would make all of his attacks from there until the end of the fight do 1 more damage.
Mm-hmm.
So if you had a deck based on a lot of powers, that fight is probably nigh impossible.
Yes.
But I had no powers in my deck.
So he was a joke.
Yeah. And stuff like that is what infuriates me in roguelikes, because it's I don't know, I've never seen any of these bosses. I don't know what's coming.
Right.
So it's just I don't have the knowledge of what that is, and it's purely punishing or rewarding the type of deck you've built, which you've built without knowledge of what's coming.
Yeah, for sure. And some of those Act 3 bosses, I've definitely hit a few that are hard counters to specific deck types.
Right, and I think that's just frustrating.
It's just kind of silly. The type of deck that I've used the most to win is low deck size, like you said, and then as many 0-cost cards as possible.
Are you talking about the Ironclad?
Just for anybody, really.
Yeah. So I had a lot of 0-cost cards in my deck too.
So I want as many 0-cost cards and card draw cards as possible, and then you just churn through your deck every turn.
You are describing my deck.
Yeah, and that's I think that's the natural way to go in that game.
Yeah.
Because it just works most of the time. But
it's more consistent.
But there's one Act 3 boss that is a complete hard counter to that.
Perfect.
Because what he does is he's called the Timekeeper or something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's every time you play a card, he counts up. And if you once he counts to 12, his strength goes up and it automatically ends your turn no matter what you're doing.
Great.
So it's okay, I have this deck that's built around playing 10 to 20 cards every turn, and so he's just getting this huge buff every turn and ending my turn at inopportune times, and that's just a hard counter.
Yeah. And it's I'm totally okay with a deck building challenge of build a deck that can, get around this boss or whatever, but it's you don't know you get 1 boss per act and it's randomized.
Yeah.
So it's you don't know which boss you're getting. So it's you could either try and build a weird jack-of-all-trade decks that could somehow avoid each boss's specific counter, assuming you know what those specific counters are.
Mm-hmm.
Or you do what most people, I would assume, do who don't look stuff up, is you try and engineer a deck that works well based around some kind of theme or mechanic principle.
Yeah.
And you just roll the dice and hope you get a boss that doesn't counter it.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, the deck building part's fun. The mechanics it has are fun. It's just sometimes the randomness can be just as with roguelikes, it's just well, did the dice go in my favor or not? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So the one relic I got that was super amazing, because there's also this mechanic of upgrading cards.
Yep.
So one of the basic cards the Ironclad starts with is called Strike. It's just a basic damage card, and you upgrade it, it'll be called Strike Plus. So whenever you upgrade a card, the plus gets added to the end, and the card's basically 50% better.
Yeah.
I got a relic somewhere during the first act that said every new attack card you acquire is automatically upgraded.
Yeah, which is huge.
That's huge.
Especially if you get it early.
Yeah, because, and I did get it early, I got it like halfway through the first act, because you can only upgrade cards at campfires.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe 2 or 3, maybe 4 times per act, you can rest at a campfire. And when you go to a campfire, you can either choose to heal HP, or you can choose to upgrade a single card.
Yeah.
One card. So I ended the game with like a deck of 18 cards, and I think all but 1 or 2 were fully upgraded, and it was because of that relic.
Right.
And it's like, and that made a world of difference because my deck was just like 50% more powerful, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So like that was huge. I also got a pair of relics. One increased my potion belt to be able to carry 5 potions instead of 3.
Mm-hmm.
And I got another relic that said every battle drops a potion for you.
Yep. And the potions have all kinds of crazy effects.
Yeah, and I got some pretty good potions.
And you can just use them whenever on your turn. They'll like give you a bunch of strength, or give you a bunch of block, or deal damage instantly to the enemies, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but yeah, it seems neat. I'm certainly going to try the other characters.
Yeah, I would say at least try all the, like I've finished the game with all the characters at this point. I don't know that I'll play a ton more. But like learning the mechanics, seeing the deck building, playing with all the different characters, like that was a fun time for me.
Yeah. And I think this falls, and I would also say this game's easier than a lot of roguelikes, because I mean I beat it on my 4th run.
Yeah.
Like that's not like that's not painstakingly overbearing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this falls in the camp of a lot of roguelikes where it's like I enjoy the process of learning the mechanics, because I think it does have some good mechanics.
Yeah.
But it's not one I see myself like playing a lot because of the roguelike nature of it.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So
like, honestly, like I think I feel pretty similarly to this that I do to like Into the Breach, even though that's less of a roguelike.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like,
yeah, I mean, I would make the argument that Into the Breach is kind of not a roguelike.
Yeah, it's not really. But you do
it
kind of
definitely
play.
has some random elements to it.
Yeah, it does.
But it's very much lighter on the randomness than like this is.
Yeah, but they're both essentially like you pick a character or squad and Into the Breach, you play through the game while building out a loadout, and then try to get through the end challenges, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there are different characters to choose from. So like in Into the Breach, I enjoyed learning the game, learning the mechanics, playing with a handful of the squads, and that was good, and I didn't really need to keep playing it anymore. And that's kind of how I feel about Slay the Spire. Like I've enjoyed the process of seeing different combinations and different characters and learning it, but now I'm like, okay, I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah, I am curious to try the other characters to see what those mechanics are and like how different they are.
Yeah, the second one's not super different.
Mm-hmm.
I think the second one's called the Silent. It's basically like warrior, rogue, wizard are the archetypes.
Perfect.
And the first one's the warrior.
Yeah. Which at the very end I was dealing crap tons of damage.
Yeah, he has the most starting health. He heals some after every combat, which is huge.
Yeah.
That's like the best thing in the game,
starting
probably. But the second one's kind of bland and not very good.
Great.
That's the rogue. And then the third one's cool. He's just wacky and crazy.
Nice.
He's a robot wizard.
All right.
Which is
well, so am I, so.
Yeah. Anyway.
You've been playing anything else, or?
That's pretty much it. The only other thing I've done worth mentioning maybe is I played a game called Kingdom with our friend Garrison, who's been on here occasionally. It's a tabletop RPG. I'm not going to go super deep into it, but it's an interesting RPG with no game master, no dice rolls, all role-playing to tell a story about a kingdom, a community of people trying to work towards a common goal. So it was interesting. I enjoyed it more than I expected to. I didn't really know what I was in for with like a GM-less, dice-less RPG. What is that even?
Yeah. That's when you first told me about it, I'm like, this just sounds like some people like just talking about stuff, like just making stuff up on the fly.
Yeah, which, I mean, that is kind of what role-playing is. It's just how many mechanics do you layer on top of that.
Right.
And this is very few.
Right.
But it has just enough mechanics to cause some interesting interactions and dilemmas and choices for players to make together.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's
Cool.
about it for me.
Yeah. As for me, we've basically covered a lot of the stuff I played between, well, I guess really everything you talked about.
Yep.
Which Slay the Spire I just started.
Yeah.
Most of my time was spent wrapping up Subnautica, and then I have one other thing I'll talk about is I revisited, let's say, one of the best games ever made. I probably put a dozen or so hours into Burnout Paradise Remastered.
Nice.
Which, that game's a decade old.
Yeah.
I've played a handful of driving games in that decade.
Yep.
And man, going back to Burnout Paradise, which I have not played in a decade, is a really stark reminder of like, wow, they just really nailed this.
Yeah.
It's like no one else has just been able to do anything like this since then. Like they're just like, nope, here's the driving game you need.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. The driving games are done. We have Burnout Paradise. It exists.
Yeah, it is crazy that like that team went on to work on Need for Speed, and they for a while were doing yearly releases, I think. And just like
and they were doing the Call of Duty Assassin's Creed like alternating teams thing.
Yeah, I guess so.
So Criterion did the Hot Pursuit reboot and the Most Wanted reboot. And there were other Need for Speed games in like the off years.
Yeah. And so for a while it definitely felt like, oh, this is going to be, they're going to follow up Burnout Paradise. But now they're doing it with more money.
Right.
And this is going to be great. And then all those games would come out, and it was like, it's almost like everybody wanted it to be the next Burnout Paradise, but then eventually everybody realizes, no, this isn't really it. Maybe next year.
It's almost, I always got the sense that there was like this push and pull of like Criterion wanted to make Need for Speed more like Burnout.
Yeah.
But EA or whoever wanted to keep the Need for Speedness of it intact.
Yeah.
And like it just always, like those two games felt like a weird middle ground.
Mm-hmm.
Which for me as a Burnout fan was a little bit of a bummer, but I don't know. It's like at the same time, it's like I don't even know how they follow up Burnout Paradise, because it's like they just kind of nailed it.
Yeah. I don't know either. I haven't played it in forever, obviously, but
I mean, I guess there's like some new modes or event types, or like there's probably some other interesting things they could come up with in that framework. But as far as like car handling goes, and just
So is that the thing? Like you're playing it now? I don't know what the last big budget racing game you would have played was, but like playing this game now versus whatever that was, do you just honestly feel like it just handles better?
It's two things that are intertwined. One is the car handling.
Yeah.
It is a pure arcade style racing game.
Right.
So the cars are just so responsive. Like you have such fine control over, like, this is the Mario Bros to like Gran Turismo's Quap or something. It's like it's like running just feels good in Mario, like driving just feels good in this. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like accelerating, turning, like drifting, e-braking, like all of that just feels amazing. And like, I think the last big budget game I played is Forza Horizon 3 2 years ago.
Right.
And like, that is somewhat arcadey, but it's like it's night and day even between that and this.
Yeah.
Just like how quickly you can and easily you can maneuver around that world. And then the other part of it that plays into this is like, I still feel like Burnout is the only racing franchise I've ever played where the focus is on making the act of driving fun.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, it's not about car culture.
Yeah.
It's not about like evading the cops. It's not about it's not
being
about
a bad dude.
Yeah, it's not about I don't know what else. Like other races, like Need for Speed's usually like cop oriented, and like Forza and Gran Turismo are very like car culture-y.
Yep.
It's not about any of that. You're not tuning nuts and bolts sliders. Like you're not like it is purely like that world. Like the world they've created in Burnout Paradise is so dumb.
It really is.
But it's dumb in like the right way to make it like fun. Like there's just like ramps and stuff set up in the most weird like oddball places, and like
there's not a city that people would actually live in and drive.
No, not at all. Like it is not a functional city.
Yeah,
but it's set up to have fun driving.
But you can do flips off of those ramps that are on the bridge.
Yeah, dude,
and, like,
you can do a barrel roll off the split ramp that leads into the quarry, where you can like jump through a giant donut and like, yeah, it's just great.
Yeah.
And like I think that even comes in with like even like the soundtrack or DJ Atomica or like the event types they do. Like one of the premier events is called Road Rage, which is where you're taking down other cars. Like this, like they have events that aren't even based on racing at all.
Yeah. That's one thing that I always miss when I try to play like a Need for Speed or a Forza Horizon. It's like, give me the stuff where I'm just like smashing other cars up and like
dude,
tossing people off cliffs. Like that's what I want to do.
Burnout Paradise is like 15% racing.
Yeah.
It's like, I would say the breakdown of that game is like 15% racing, like 30% wrecking shit.
And
then like almost all the rest of it is just driving around that world, having a fun time, looking for gates to smash, looking for billboards to smash, like, and then like there's a chunk of it that's like doing cool stunts.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's the breakdown of that game. And like, that's just fun.
It is. And I remember even in like Burnout 3, and this might be in Paradise and I'm just not remembering specifically, but I would like do the road rage events and like pick like a school bus as my car so that I'm just huge and nobody could take me down and I'm just running over everybody and it's great. And there's like no other racing games where you would realistically think like, I think the right play here is to play the school bus.
But it's totally valid.
Yeah.
Yeah, because one of the stats on your cars is a strength stat, and it's like how much can you bully around the other cars?
Right.
And it's great. Yeah. I like did a road rage, and I was just like, checking other people into traffic and off bridges and into walls and stuff, and you're like, this is great. Like, why don't racing games just have more fun stuff like this?
Yeah. It's a shame. I mean, it's great that they remastered this game. But it's a shame that other car games haven't been able to follow that pattern.
It was simultaneously really fun to revisit this game and be reminded like how much fun this game was. And then it was also kind of a bummer of like, why does nobody else just try and make driving games that are just about fun driving?
Yeah.
And like, I know at least for Forza, it's because they're very obsessed with car culture.
Yeah, that's what that is.
So they want to use licensed cars, which you can't like, which that removes a lot of things. Like, because when you wreck a car in Burnout, it's gnarly. Like those things crunch real good.
Yep.
And you can also get like unrealistic air time and like acceleration. And it's just like all of the physics of that. Like Burnout's able to make all of the physics like just super over the top and arcadey in a way that's fun and feels good.
Right.
Like that's where that car feel comes in. And I feel like in like a Forza, they can't really do that because they are striving for some level of realism. And it kind of made me sad that like, we're probably not really going to get many driving games that are just like able to pull this off.
Yeah. And like, I don't know why. I don't even know what Need for Speed is doing anymore. It doesn't seem like they've had a hit in a while.
No.
So, I don't know.
Yeah, and I kind of like that Most Wanted one that Criterion did work on, but that was 2012, and like there's maybe been 2 or 3 Need for Speed since then. I don't think any of them have done very well.
I'm trying to think, like, because this is a genre that I haven't played Paradise, and I don't know that I would fall in love with it, but this is a genre, I guess, Air Group here, we're not like car culture people or racing game people, really sports game people. So sorry to any potential listeners out there. apologies. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just not like our cup of tea. But I also found myself in the camp of like the handful of racing games that I've enjoyed are really more like goofy arcadey games with a racing veneer than actual like, or maybe they're like arcade / driving games rather than racing games. Like you have your kart racers where you can like hit people with stuff like Carmageddon where you blow people up, and Road Rash where you can like smash people like while you're racing. Like I find myself engaging a lot more with just trying to wreck people than actually like I don't know, to me there's something very tedious about just like trying to drive in the best straight line possible.
And that's where, because I'm in the same boat as you, and that's like, I used to not think I was into racing or driving games. I say driving instead of racing because, as I mentioned, Burnout's so little about actual racing. But that's where Burnout really surprised me, is like, I had always tended to like what you're talking about, like just more arcadey, goofy stuff. And like, that's where I think Burnout nailed it and no one else is doing it.
Yeah, I think that's tough. I mean, I think, I don't know who the audience is for that necessarily, other than people who are already locked up with like the kart racers.
Yeah. And I'm glad that like Forza exists for those people. I guess I just wish there were more of this Burnout style stuff for people like us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Physics are hard to get right too, I think.
I think that's the other thing, because like there's actually been a couple of like more goofy racing games or driving games that have come out recently between like Onrush and Wreckfest.
Yeah, I was about to bring up Onrush and ask you if you had any interest in that.
Kinda. But I think like, and feels a hard thing to really know until you play it. But like I was watching videos of both Onrush and Wreckfest, and I was watching them and I'm like, the physics just don't seem.
Yeah.
Like I'd probably need to play it to really know, but it's like something about it it didn't, like the look of the driving just didn't seem on point. I don't know.
Sure.
But I mean, Onrush does seem potentially pretty fun.
Yeah, it seems like people are enjoying that game. I wish it wasn't. Or I wish there was either a little more to it or it wasn't like a full price thing.
Yeah, that's the other thing that deters me from that, is it's like, it basically looks like it's one multiplayer suite. And like that's kind of what's in the game.
Yeah.
Which could be worth it. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just hard to know for sure.
Yeah, Onrush was actually the game that inspired me to go back to Burnout, because I picked up Burnout Paradise Remastered in a sale. And then I was like watching videos of Onrush and I was like, man, I miss Burnout. And played Burnout. But maybe I'll try Onrush at some point. It does seem potentially interesting. Wreckfest just seems goofy. That totally is. You're just, all right, let's go wreck a bunch of cars.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. And you're driving school buses in it too.
In the context of video games, right?
Well, you know.
Yeah, man, I'm on board for
got to break a few eggs.
Yeah. But yeah, Burnout's great.
Yeah. Cool.
It's a good time. And that remastered comes with like all the DLC that I had never messed with before.
Oh yeah.
It's like the full package.
Right. That makes sense.
But I mean, the base game's the best part of it. So.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'll stop yammering on the amazingness of Burnout.
No, that's fine. What else? Have you been playing anything else, or is that?
Nah, not really. Okay. The only other thing I've touched on a little bit is Opus Magnum, but I don't know if anyone has interest in that.
I'm somewhat curious in it. I don't know if you have any high-level thoughts on it from what you've played.
Yeah, I'm actually probably done with it. I don't know. It got amazing reviews, but I don't know what you've seen of it. So it's like, it's a puzzle game where you're like trying to manipulate. It's a very like nuts and boltsy, like machinery type.
Yeah, kind of
like,
clockwork
thing. Like you could maybe compare it to programming in some ways, but it's like you're given some pieces and you basically have to rearrange them into a certain formation.
Yeah.
With a bunch of like turning knobs and like you're like turning these levers that'll like grab stuff and move them around, and you're like basically programming commands in. You're like, all right, I want you to grab, then turn right twice, and then extend, and then drop. And It's like all these combining these little pieces and stuff, which seems potentially really cool. And I think it's just like, you have to be someone who like gets really into the weeds of that stuff and really enjoys all of the little details of that, because it goes deep with it quick. And I think I got to the point pretty quickly where I was just like staring at like, okay, so I'm not big on like score chasing stuff.
Yeah.
So like, I think I got to the point where like, I'd see what they'd want me to do and I'd be like, all right, I could brute force this pretty easily.
Yeah.
It's going to take me like 10 minutes to set it up, but it's like the brute force of this is not really that like hard.
It's just like expanding out simple concepts and repeating them, kind of.
Basically, yeah. So it's like I could go through the motions, I could set this up, and it would solve the puzzle, and it would get me on to the next one. And I felt like I could just sit there and quote unquote bumble my way through it like that, just like the most straightforward brute force way possible.
Yeah.
And then whenever you beat a puzzle, so my favorite thing in the game actually is when you beat a puzzle, there's like next to the continue button is a save GIF button.
Yeah.
And you get a really cool GIF of like your machine running, which is great.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I really like watching those things. But then you also have all these score tabs, and it's like, all right, how many like turns did it take you? Like, how many steps did it take you to complete this? Like, how many pieces did you use to complete this? And it's like you're trying to like it's like trying to incentivize you to like finding a solution in like the most efficient way possible.
Yeah.
So like, I guess I'd kind of compare it to like, I don't know, a Bayonetta or something, where it's like you go through, you play, you beat the level, but then you get like a C.
Yeah, and you're like, well, what do I need to do get an S?
Yeah. So it felt kind of like that. Like I was the guy just bumbling through, like getting the C, and then you see those charts, and it like compares you to averages, and you're like, well, I did okay on the steps, but man, I used way more pieces than everyone else. Or and I guess I just don't. I started getting the impression that like, okay, I think the people who really get into this game are people who are going to get really into like the fine details of optimizing these machines and these commands.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Sounds like human resources machine or human
kind of, yes. It is like that kind of like low level programming kind of thing. So I think it's definitely like a thing for like a very specific mindset.
Yeah.
And I think it's well made for that. I thought Human Resource Machine was pretty good at that too. I think and I also saw how big the game was. I'm like, oh, this is a long game. And I think for me, I was like, I don't know if this is what I'm into right now.
Sure.
But it seems very well made for what it's going for. I just don't think it's for me.
Cool. Yeah, when you're talking about it, it definitely reminds me of this weird game I played a few years ago called Infinifactory.
Yeah.
It was like a 3D factory conveyor belt building thing that's all very like logic programming stuff. And that game infuriated me to no end. It just like made me so like you could ask my wife about it anytime. Like there's this weird puzzle game that like I would just get so angry at sitting at my computer. She'd be like, "What's wrong?
What made you angry? Just like
can't move the pieces the way I want, and they're going all the wrong way, and now I have to take the whole thing apart." Yeah.
That's totally what this is too. Is like I would like start building something and I like lay the foundations. Like, all right, I know I just need to like grab this thing, drop it into this to transform it, and then so like the premise is like you're an alchemist, so you're like dealing with all these elements. So you're like combining things. It's like you'll pick up two elements, put them next to each other to combine them, and then like transform them into something else. And I don't know. And it's like, all right, all I need to do is like get this next to this, move it here. And it's like, all right, I'll start doing this. And then you realize like, oh, wait, no, this is a complication I didn't foresee. So now I have to tear this apart. And you totally get that.
Yeah.
Which is cool to an extent, but like the game it's really just a lot of that.
Yeah.
And I think that thing's neat enough that I think I realized I didn't want that much of it.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
So, well, I think we're going to close out a show. See what everyone's up to next. Ryan, what's on your plate coming up?
I should be on track to finish up God of War soon-ish. So I think the next thing I'll be looking at will probably be Subnautica.
Nice.
Be the next big one to jump into.
Strap your flippers on.
Yep.
What about you, Will? What you got going on?
Oh, I got plenty of jams.
Mm-hmm. What 30 games are you going to tackle before next episode?
Well, I'm probably going to finish Arkham Origins. At least I hope so. I'm going out of town for a little bit, but I should be able to polish that off. Then
I have faith in you.
Probably playing some of this Guns, Gore, and Cannoli 2, Super Mega Baseball 2. I've been working on the Black Ops 3 campaign co-op on PS4. And
is that a PS Plus title?
Yeah, well, I don't know what it was. It was free on there, and it's got a co-op campaign, and that's really all you got to say to me.
Okay, I was wondering where the Black Ops had come out of.
Yeah, it's just
free
free
plus
on there.
co-op.
Hey, I'm on it. So anyway, so that's what I've been messing with.
Does there exist a solitaire co-op game?
I would think I would have found it.
Wait.
I think
my head is like starting to hurt a little bit.
Co-op at tear.
Oxymoronic here. We've got like a paradox. The fabric of reality is tearing apart.
I have been meaning to ask you, Will, do you have Windows 10 on your PC?
I think so.
Have you played Windows Solitaire on this PC?
I don't think so.
Because if you are not aware, Windows 10 is tied into the Xbox ecosystem, and there may in fact be achievement points for Windows Solitaire.
That's interesting. I don't play like that style of solitaire, like the main.
You play more regal solitaire.
Well, it's like it's the type of solitaire I play is more like a mix of like a mahjong and solitaire.
Right. Right.
Okay.
So it's kind of that situation.
I may in fact have achievement points for Windows Solitaire. Can also get points for Minesweeper. But anyway, Nate, what you got coming up?
Now I kind of want to go play some Minesweeper.
Yeah, man, do it.
Minesweeper is great.
Minesweeper is great.
But that's probably not what I'm going to play.
All right. Well, if you do, you can get achievement points for it.
I mean, I might. I don't know. I'm undecided. I will probably be playing. The main thing I want to get to soon here is Orwell Ignorance is Strength, the second season of that game. And then I downloaded a couple games from the Xbox Game Pass that I have right now that I'll check out. I played like 45 minutes of The Division last night and was like, this isn't very fun. And then I also downloaded Recore, which I'm going to see if that's any fun.
Okay, I'm curious about that one.
Yeah. So I have a handful of games on there that I'll poke into and see if I want to play them anymore. Metro Last Light is another one. So I'll poke at some of those, and then I'm going out of town for a week, so I'll get something on the Switch to take out of town, but I am, as of yet, undecided of what that's going to be.
I think Metro Last Light's pretty good.
Yeah.
You might like that.
Okay.
I'm a little curious, too, because, I mean, I don't know, The Division being a multiplayer game, I imagine it's going to be a slow start, but it seemed generally well received. Do you think it's just like, hey, this is a slow start, or hey, I would want to play this with people, or just, hey, this game is, I don't know.
Yeah.
Not that good.
I don't know. Maybe I just wasn't in the right mindset for it either. I don't know. I popped in there and I was like, hey, you're in New York. You're a cool guy. Get the cool guy stuff and shoot bad dudes. And I was like,
what's wrong with that?
Here we go. I'm going to aim and shoot
I mean,
at the guys,
I'm in New York, and I'm a cool guy. Like,
yeah. I mean,
Ryan, are you the Division?
That information is classified.
Yeah, I don't know. It just everything about the like opening of that game was so like soulless and bland. I was just like, okay, I don't know. I don't know if I'm into this.
Pretty silly.
Yeah.
I'm kind of interested in what they do with the second one.
Yeah.
But And I feel like if it is good, it will probably be off of like some form of team play.
Yeah, that's probably right. It's probably not even worth like trying to play this game single player at this point. I'll probably just move on with my life.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that's about it.
Life moving.
All right.
Watch you, Flex.
I will continue to attempt to slay the Spire. That's really the only thing I'm playing at the moment. I have a couple backlog items that I'm sure I'll pick something else up in the next 2 weeks. I don't know what yet. I have my eye on this Octopath Traveler, which I believe comes out this coming week. So that may be a Switch idea for you, Nate, if you're traveling.
Yeah, I'm going to see how the reception of that turns out this week before deciding on what my travel game will be.
Yeah, so that's kind of the new game I'm looking at. Otherwise, Slay the Spire and potentially some backlog items. So.
Yeah.
Solid.
And I think that's going to call it a show. That's the show. This is episode 41 of ATACS. That's what you've been listening to. I'm Flex, joined by Ryan, Will, and Nate. We are signing off. Thanks for listening. See you next time.